Leadership. One of the most important aspects of leadership is communication. And one of the most important aspects of communication is storytelling. That's why I'm so excited to mention the Stories with Traction course with you. In this course, you will learn how to be a great storyteller. I share concepts with you on how you can boost sales, enhance your internal communication and marketing, and create a vibrant company culture. If you're looking to build a story bank for your organization and utilize a framework to persuade more effectively, go check out the course in the show notes, the Stories with Traction course. Now, on to the podcast. Persuading people to take the actions we want can be hard. Our teams and clients are bombarded with thousands of messages every single day. But there is a way for you to get above the noise. Stories. This is the Stories with Traction podcast, and I'm your host, Matt Zaun. Join my guests and me as we unpack the power of storytelling. We'll talk about topics like leadership, sales, and marketing, all through the lens of strategic storytelling. Enjoy this episode. I've always respected grit, sheer grit. Individuals who say, I will make this work regardless of the cost. That's why I had to have Erica Rankin on the Stories with Traction podcast. It has been incredible to see what she's been able to do in such a short period of time. For those of you who aren't familiar with Erica, she is the founder and CEO of Brodo, which is Canada's first better for you edible cookie dough. Welcome to the show, Erica.
What a nice introduction. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. I am literally fascinated with your story. Since I've been following you on social media for the last couple of years, I've gotten pieces of your journey based on what I've read, but I'm really excited to unpack it even more today. So I think we'll just start off with, where did the idea for Brodo even come from?
So I guess in 2018, I competed in bodybuilding. So I did 2 bikini competitions. And prior to that, I had to prep for those shows for about a year and a half. I had to basically eliminate all of the things that I love from my diet, like, donuts, pastries, cookies, cake, cookie dough, all those things. I have a huge sweet tooth. So I started manipulating my favorite recipes and making unjunk foods, and adding protein to things, swapping out sugars. And one of the things that I would make was like a healthier cookie dough with added protein, less sugar, plant-based, cleaner ingredients. And I would share these recipes on my Instagram account. And a lot of people really liked that and they would recreate them. I would get asked constantly if I would ever sell the things that I baked. And then I guess fast forward, end of 2018, I quit my job, went backpacking through Southeast Asia, met entrepreneurs. And yeah, the seed was planted and I got home and I sat down with myself and was like, okay, what am I passionate about and what do people want? And it was the cookie dough that I used to make for myself. So I decided to package it and sell it. And Brodo was launched in December 2019.
All right, so there's a lot to unpack with what you just said. Okay, so the very first thing is you didn't aggressively pursue this for years. It wasn't like you went to school to do what you're doing now, and like you literally almost like it was I don't want to say an accident, but you kind of fell into it, right? Like you weren't actively looking for this. You saw the need in the marketplace and you essentially jumped in.
Yeah, that's, I guess, pretty much what it was. I went to school for psychology and then I started working like traditional 9 to 5 in my field. And I wasn't getting paid a lot. I wasn't fulfilled. It got to a point where I realized that that wasn't what I wanted to do. And then I entered my existential crisis mode and then went backpacking in hopes of finding myself, which luckily I think I did. So,
That's
yeah.
awesome. Wow. So what
Yeah.
was that trip like? Like what was the length of it? Where were some of the places that you went?
Yeah, so I went initially I was only supposed to go for 1 month and then I ended up staying for over 3 and my parents were not super happy, but I spent my birthday there, spent Christmas there. I went to Thailand, Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia. I met so many different people. I'd never ever gone to like a third world country before, so I got to immerse myself in like a different culture, which was really cool. Meet people, you know, from all different backgrounds, all different ages, different experiences. And then I think the coolest thing was talking to entrepreneurs who, you know, were pursuing something that was completely different to what they studied in school, or a lot of them were dropouts or didn't have business degrees. And I think that just like showed me that it's a viable path that pretty much anyone can take. Like you don't need to have, you know, any tools to pursue it. You can go and figure it out yourself. You just have to put in the work to do it, right?
All right, so I love that because I get asked the question all the time. Oh, did you go to school for what you did? And what I do, like you can't go to school for. It's not taught in a university, right? It's I've taken over a decade of mistakes that I made in the political environment regarding messaging, and I put it into trainings that I do for companies regarding how they can connect with strategic storytelling. It's not something you go to school to try to fumble through, right? You learn through years and years and years. And I find this fascinating because I do think a lot of people think you need specific training on something to do something, and that kind of comes. I think there's a lot to be said on you learn, adjust, do learn, adjust, and you keep going and going and refining and refining. And that's what's amazing about what you've done is I've seen elements of your journey and I see not necessarily perfected, but what I've seen, I'm like, wow, it gets better and better and better and better. And it's almost like you step back and you have to look and you're like, wow, like at this moment, it's almost mastery, even if it doesn't feel that way. But if you look back 2 years ago, or you look back even 2 months ago, all the change. So I think that's really encouraging for people to hear.
Yeah, thank you. I think sometimes it's hard to do that and step back and appreciate how far you've come.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. So, all right. So you come back from this trip, and then what happened after the trip? You said, "Hey, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go for it," and you just start, or what does that even look like once you made the decision?
Yeah, I literally Googled business workshop near me and I drove 45 minutes to like a business resource center and I learned how to like manage cash flow, write a business plan. I think I went to 4 or 5 workshops and just like connected with other people that were just like me, you know, starting a new business, had no idea what they were doing. Like we were all so new to it. I got my logo made off Fiverr for $50. Like I remember sitting on my mom's carpet trying to come up with like a business name, and I had like pro dough, so like protein cookie dough, and then I realized, oh, that name's taken, and you can't do that. Like you have to go in the trademark data search or whatever and look stuff up, and it was just all these little things that I was learning along the way. And then I guess yeah, I just started like experimenting with different ingredients and got my friends and family to like taste test different things, and I made my own labels on Photoshop with that Fiverr logo, you know, and like had like clip art, stock art cookies that I dragged and dropped and used my fitness pal to calculate like the nutrition facts table, which is probably like not the right way to do it, but it worked. So
Wow.
I guess I just like did it pretty scrappily, and a lot of my ingredients I got from Costco when I first started actually, because I didn't really need a whole lot. So yeah, I just kind of did that, and I also packed my life up and moved to a new city. Like I couldn't afford to start a business in Toronto. I was living with my parents at the time, and I needed to move closer to the city where there was the kitchen and stuff. So I found a commercial kitchen about 6 hours away, found a roommate online, never met her before, moved in with her. Everything was good. We got along really well and we lived together for 6 months. But yeah, that's, I guess, how I started it. I just kind of went all in, you know?
Wow. And you along the way, you're finding out that there's a lot more that you need to learn. Right? I mean, that's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff that you need to learn in a pretty quick amount of time.
Yeah, and it's just like it's like whack-a-mole. I always say like you like hit something, you figure something out, and then something else pops up, and it's like, oh, now I gotta like you know like it just things keep coming up. It's like an endless learning curve. And I remember when I first started like networking, I didn't really even know what that was because I needed help growing my business. Someone was saying like, oh, send me a calendar invite, and I'm like, what is that? What's a calendar invite? I've never done that before. I'm like on Google. They're like, yeah. So it was just even like little things like that I had never done before. So it was, yeah, it was interesting.
That is interesting. So you mentioned bodybuilding and competition, do you feel that it's in your DNA to be an entrepreneur? Do you feel that you, I don't know if there's different circumstances and experiences that position you to have more grit, or do you think someone's necessarily born an entrepreneur? Do you think they become an entrepreneur? How did you get to the point where you had that just jump in, do it mentality? Because a lot of people don't have that mentality.
Yeah, I don't know. I think like you can learn the skills to be an entrepreneur. You just have to want it bad enough. And I think a lot of people are comfortable and happy with like working a regular job or, pursuing, I guess, what everyone else kind of pursues, and they cut things off after 5 p.m., right? And go home and have weekends off. But for me, I just hated it so much. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew what I didn't want to do. And it wasn't that. And I didn't want to work for anyone. And one of the reasons why I started my business was, yeah, I wanted to like provide a cleaner, healthier alternative to a sweet treat that we all grew up with, and like bring back those nostalgic feelings in a healthier way. But at the same time, I just wanted to be my own boss and, and not answer to anyone. And I never realized how hard that was. And if I could tell myself anything, it would be, it's going to be hard, and expect that it's going to be hard. Because I definitely went into it with a bit of naiveness.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so fascinating to me for people that just jump in the way that you did. So one of the things that I feel that you've mastered at that I've seen is the marketing piece, and that's, getting the word out. And I've seen a lot of just different posts that you've had, particularly on LinkedIn. That's my social media of choice. And you just have so many different stories that go mini viral, right? And it's just incredible. Did you kind of do the exact same thing? You do learn, adjust in that arena as well?
Yeah, it's interesting. So with LinkedIn, I only turned to it because I didn't know how to grow my business. And in 2020, I went on there and I remember writing my pantry and looking at all the products that I consume regularly. And I reached out to the founders and CEOs of those companies and basically got mentorship from them. Some of them are still my mentors to this day. Everyone's pretty receptive and wants to help because they've been in my shoes before, which was really awesome. And then now I try to return the favor and give back when I'm able to. Um, but when I went on LinkedIn, there was a lot of shiny stuff on there, like people talking about raising and adding team members, launching into new accounts, like all this great stuff happening, but no one was talking about the hardships and the adversity and all the things that we face, but no one really wants to admit, and no one really wants to like let you see that side of them or their business. And then I just started to post about it, and I think it resonated with a lot of people, and I think that's just been like my goal since day one, is to just kind of be honest about the journey, because there's like a false picture that's painted about entrepreneurship. Even I kind of fell into that trap too. I'm not going to lie. When I first started it, I was like, this is going to be so easy. I'm going to be so rich. I'm going to have a big exit. And then you get into it and you're like, oh, wow, like I'm not going to pay myself for a year or two or maybe three. It's a little
Sure.
scary. So I think just like opening up that conversation and talking about it normalizes it. And then it's not as discouraging for newer entrepreneurs or founders, right?
Yeah, I appreciate that vulnerability aspect. And I think a lot of people do understand that. But it's, again, a lot of it is what we're thinking, but not what we're saying. So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I see just the engagement that you get, and a lot of it's due to the different elements of this of your story that you're sharing, your journey along the way. And it's amazing how like people will show up. They just once they have that connection and they've built some level of trust with you, like they desperately want you to succeed because they've been following your journey. They want to be part of your story, and I think that's really cool to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You said something in there about reaching out. You reached out for mentorship. So that's the ask piece. And this is something I think a lot of people talk about, but they don't actually do. So it's really cool to hear that you did it. And I always recommend people make a game out of this. So years and years ago, I also found that idea very valuable. So I made a game out of it. I started asking people that I thought would immediately turn me down, say, there's no way I'm going to give this guy any time of day. And it's amazing people that will actually help you. And that's why I like to gamify this. So I always challenge everyone when I'm talking about the ask is to literally make a game out of it. Reach out to people that you never would think in your wildest dreams they'd be willing to help you, even return your email, even talk to you on the phone. And it's amazing people that'll show up. I have some pretty crazy stories of people that I've sent letters to, I've sent emails to, and they get back in touch with me and they're like, yeah, I'll hop on the phone with you for 30 minutes, or yeah, I'll help you with this. It is wild. So it was really cool to hear you say that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. And I tell people that too, because I think some people are scared that, I don't know, or even like of asking for help. Like some people don't like doing that. It's uncomfortable. And what's the worst that can happen? They're just going to say no or not reply. Right. And then you just keep going and keep knocking on other doors. And if you don't ask, you're never going to get it. So, and
Sure.
one conversation can do so much for you.
Sure. Absolutely. What do you think the biggest surprise has been with scaling your business? Something that you might have thought would have been, oh, should be easy, that you found out it was not easy. It was quite hard.
Like so much, like pretty much everything. I guess
Everything.
for me, yeah, it's just like the money that it takes to build a business. You're just constantly reinvesting, and with like food and beverage, like inventory management. You've talked about how I'm good at marketing, and I know I'm good at marketing, but I'm not good at operations, and I recognize that. And trying to do that on my own for 3 years was really hard, and I made some mistakes. And now I brought in like an operations advisor who's coming on and actually helping me and can manage that side of the business effectively. So I think we'll kind of complement each other's skills really nicely. But yeah, just like wearing all the hats, I think. And now I'm an employer, and I've never been an employer, and I'm taking on this leadership position, which is like stepping into a whole new role and learning how to do that. And now you're responsible for someone else and their, finances and stuff. So it's fun. And I'm really grateful that I have the ability to do it, but it's like constantly like evolving and switching roles, right?
It's what's amazing to me is like, so you started it, you're doing this competition. You're like, I want this, I want this treat that tastes really good, this snack. You can't do it, right, because you want to be competitive. And now like you fast forward and you're like, did you ever think that you're going to have to learn leadership abilities, the elements of labels, the food and beverage industry, the trademarks, the marketing? It's just it's amazing. Like if you had like a movie and you were fast forwarding throughout this, like could you have even imagined that it was this amount of work? I mean, the answer is no, right? Because you said, right, just all the different
Yeah.
things that came up.
Yeah, it's a lot, and it's never ending, right? And like you think like, oh, when I get here, it's going to be great and I'm going to have it all figured out. And then you get to that finish line, and the finish line is actually like 1,000 meters further. And then when you get there, it moves again. It's
Sure.
constantly moving. You're always growing, and there's always surprises at every stage, right?
Sure, sure. So I had mentioned to you I live in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a huge food and beverage state in the U.S. Huge. We have tons and tons of farms. The beverage industry here is huge. So for people listening that aren't familiar with food and beverage, they're not familiar with some of the other things that come with that industry. What are some things that you feel that you've had to deal with that other businesses might not, that don't have perishable items?
Shelf life, like when you make too much product and then you're sitting on it and it's like a ticking time bomb. You have to figure out where it's going to go. That's
Sure.
stressful. I guess, yeah, inflation. I know like sunflower oil, the cost of that went up because Ukraine's like the biggest grower of sunflowers. And then that kind of falls on to a bunch of companies that use it in their products. So,
Wow.
and then we have to pass that on to the retailers. And it's funny because even me as a consumer, like going into a grocery store like 5 years ago or even 4 years ago, I viewed things so much differently. And then now when I go in, I'm like, wow, is that company even profitable? Like, there's no way. And like, that's an aggressive sale. Like, are they getting delisted? Like there's like things that I know now.
Interesting.
And just like the cost too to like get in, like I think it's similar in the States, but basically when you get into retail, you have to buy real estate on shelf. So they'll charge you like, okay, well, we'll list you in this store, like a couple hundred stores, but you have to pay $30,000 for one SKU, like one flavor. You have three flavors, that's $90,000. So you get in, you have like a year and a half to perform. And if you're not selling, they'll literally kick you out and you don't get that back. So that's another thing too, is there's just like a lot of barriers to entry with the retail game and the food space because it's very competitive.
Interesting. All right, so now you have me fascinated by this. So like give us an example of you go into a store and what causes you to think, wow, are they even profitable? Is it where they are on the shelf as far as like maybe being too low so they're not eye level? Is it cost? Is it display? What would cause you to think that?
I guess sometimes, like, if there's really nice packaging, really good ingredients, and they're listed for like a really low price. And I know there's certain retailers that want like bigger margins and they want to like list the product for less. So sometimes we take the hit as the brands. And when you go into a store and you see something on sale, like 20% off, 30% off, I always thought it was the stores that were taking the hit, but it's not. Every time that product gets scanned, the brand gets it's called a manufacturer chargeback. So we get a chargeback. So say I'm on sale at a store and I sell 200 units, they're $1 off each for that sale. I get charged back $200 because 200 were
Wow.
sold on that sale. So
Wow.
that's something else that I'm learning. I'm like, oh, okay. So there's all these chargebacks and stuff. And the other thing is too, like no one really pays on time either. So you have to like pay your manufacturer for product in 30 days, but your distributor doesn't pay you for like 70 days. So you're like constantly trying to juggle things and
Wow.
make sure you have enough money in the bank, you know?
Yeah, interesting. Wow. I read this book years ago. I couldn't tell you the title. It's been over a decade. I was fascinated by it though. It was merchandising. It was the psychology of merchandising, where basically these individuals studied movement of people in stores and like the shelf placement was really important. So, like, do people turn left or do they turn right when they enter a store? When they enter a store, what's the first thing to do with their cart? And then, like, the psychology of like putting the really healthy food in the store right away. So you're loading up on healthy. So by the time you get to the snack food, you feel less guilty for loading up on. Like the whole thing was charted out. It was just fascinating to me. So it's interesting to hear you talk about other elements that go into shelf space. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, if you have that book name, I'd love
For
to get that
sure.
and read it.
For sure. It has been over a decade. I wish that I could remember. I'm fascinated with the psychology of stuff like that. I was recently talking with someone about menu positioning, about how some chain restaurants will literally study eye movements when someone looks at a menu, positioning of the photos. Obviously, the photos are the most profitable elements of that menu. So when people see these amazing photographs of a sandwich, it's the highest profit value for that restaurant. They check when you sit a family down, how many people are looking at their phones, how long does it take them to order? Because then you have the turnover, right, of the table, so you have to get people in and out, and it's just amazing the psychology that goes into positioning. And I don't think enough businesses think about it when someone is looking at something, what goes through their head, what movements do they make, and a lot of that's based on the psychology of the positioning of it. It's just fascinating stuff to me.
Hmm. Yeah, it really is all psychology and it's really interesting.
For sure, for sure. So what's the road ahead for you? So you have done a lot in the last few years. You had mentioned about how you feel that you reach one goal and then there's a lot more to come. What are a few goals that you have this year that once achieved, you're going to feel really good?
Yeah, just new products. I just want to get them out into the world. It's a lot, like getting the packaging done and the formulas and the website and selling into the US. Like that is the biggest goal, and I'm really excited for that to happen. And then on the Canadian retail front, we're I guess innovating and pivoting a little bit and moving away from our current product and switching to like a single serve option. And we're improving the formula. And so I'm kind of doing two different things. The dough formula and the packaging is changing, and then the cookies are launching. And I think right now it's just product development and head down and getting that done. And I just really want to get those launched into the market and see how people like them.
Wow. Wow, that's awesome. And it's amazing. Again, it sounds so easy and simple, but there's a lot that needs to go into that for sure. So what would a single when you said single serve, what does that entail behind the scenes?
So like the I guess the operations side of things, you mean? to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
operational as far as what you need to do with staff. What would that look like?
Yeah, so I'm really lucky and I have a manufacturer, and I guess long story short, the way that I was selling my product before, it was cookie dough in a tub, and the tubs were I've never been so emotional over packaging. It was just the bane of my existence. I hated it. It was expensive. They're heavy. They're hard to ship. You can't really scale with them if you're a small brand. Like the next order of packaging that I would have to put in would be 100,000 units, which I do not need.
Wow.
So we decided, okay, like it's too expensive. It's too expensive on shelf too for consumers. So we're going to switch to single serve, and it's going to be like basically like protein bar format, refrigerated.
Oh,
So people will
wow.
just grab and go, single serve. Like it can be merchandised in several parts of the store. And yeah, it'll just be more affordable as well. So people can try it. And if they really like it, then maybe they can buy a case of them. They won't be stuck with like a whole tub at a higher price point. So
Oh,
we're
wow.
just,
Yeah.
yeah, we're just like getting the packaging done. And I'm waiting for my designers to finalize the designs, but you can't do that until you have the formulas done to put the formulas on the packaging. And then, of course, there's lead times and stuff, and you're relying on 9,000 people for 9,000 different things, and people get sick and people go away. And sometimes things take way longer than you'd hope, but it all comes together in the end, I think. So,
Wow. So this is easier to ship.
yeah, so they're easier to ship. The cost is just lower. It's easier to scale with my manufacturer because the old formatting that I had was very manual. They were literally taking pucks of dough and like depositing them by hand,
Oh,
which
wow.
increased the labor costs. This way, they have a machine that literally just like pumps out these bars or these bites, and I don't really have to have a higher tolling cost because it's so automated, which is really awesome. And it's more scalable, more profitable.
Wow. Okay. Now, do you have to have different manufacturers in different locations depending on where? I mean, obviously, you probably would, depending on where you're going, right? You mentioned the US market. What would that entail?
Yeah, so I think the goal, I have one in Toronto, and we're gonna like scale here and just ship all throughout Canada from Toronto. And then when I hop across the border into the US and plan to launch the dough into retail there, we'll probably have some conversations with co-manufacturers there. A lot of brands, they export their products that are made in Canada into the US until they get to a certain volume. And then when it makes sense, then they partner with a manufacturer in the States. Because yeah, our dollar is not very strong right now, and it hasn't been for a while. And with the conversion, it kind of is tricky if you're not if you don't have a lot of volume out there. So
Sure. Yeah. So that's another thing to keep in mind, right? The
mhm.
conversion and that entails as well. What would you say? So I have three children. I have an 8-year old, I have a 7-year old, and a 4-year old. So two sons and a daughter. What would you say to my oldest son who is starting to get that entrepreneur bug, if you will? He started like he even shared with me, I kid you not, a 5-page business plan with me the other day. He's 8 years
Oh my
old. It
God.
was nuts, nuts, where he based on conversations of what he's seen me do. He knows a little bit about what I do just based on conversation. He had a 5-page business plan on how I could make my business better. I was so bewildered. He's doing bump, bump, all this stuff. I was blown away. I just show my wife. I'm like, read this.
Holy.
Read. It's
Wow.
insane. So obviously I don't know what he's going to do, with his life. However, he's going to do something that has some type of grit because it's in him. What words of advice would you give to my oldest son, Elliot, who more than likely will probably become an entrepreneur one day?
Yeah, that's it. That's incredible. That is so I'm yeah, interested to see what the business plan said, what was in there. Um But yeah, I guess just like don't hold back and go do what you want to do. And it sounds like you're super supportive, and I'm sure your wife is supportive of whatever he wants to do, which is really awesome. But I think like do what you want to do, and there's going to be naysayers, obviously. But I think just like following your heart, all the cheesy stuff, and like do what you want to do. And yeah, I don't know. I wish I had someone tell me that when I was younger and that it was something that I could do. And like you have all the tools that you need. You can pretty much do whatever you want to do, right? Like you don't need permission. So
Sure, sure. That's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, he's looking stuff up online and he's pulling this together and this. Like he has all these ideas. It's just fascinating to
so
me.
cool.
8 years
Yeah.
old. I mean, I could have never dreamed at that age thinking of business the way he does. But you mentioned naysayers. So were there people in your life that you were surprised they weren't as supportive, and kind of what that did along your journey, and that maybe they're supportive now once they've seen what you've done? Can you recall anyone? You don't need to obviously mention anyone by name, but and does anyone stick out to you that you were just blown away that they weren't supportive?
Yeah, I guess I had some friends, and again, like, it's hard when you're doing something that's different, and I think it might make some people uncomfortable when you're trying something new. So I did have some people that, openly said, "Oh, I support you," and, but I don't think they really meant it, and I don't think they really meant the best for me. And like my mom has been really awesome. She's been super supportive, and it sounds crazy when your daughter comes home from a trip and says, yeah, I'm not going to work a normal job. I'm going to start my own business, a cookie dough business. And she's like, what? Like she's a boomer. She didn't really eat cookie dough growing up. She's like, why? Who would want that? Right. But she was super supportive. My dad, on the other hand, is very businessy. And when I told him what I was doing, he really did not understand it. And I think he had a hard time wrapping his head around it. And now that I've proven in the business and, I'm selling and I'm growing, now he's very supportive. So I think in the beginning it was really hard and I didn't have a ton of support. I did have like, a couple of people that were really awesome and by my side throughout it all. But I think that's the most cases, right? Like when you start something new and you're a nobody and you're not selling and, like things are hard. They're always hard. It's harder to get people rooting for you when you haven't built anything. And then when you built something, then people come out of the woodworks and they're like, I always knew you could do it. You're like, who are you? What? You know what I mean?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not malicious. Sometimes people don't want others to get hurt, right? So that
Yeah.
being uncomfortable, I can see that in many ways for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah. No, but thank you for your time. I very much appreciate just unpacking elements of your story. It has been literally fascinating to just watch your journey thus far. It's been very inspiring. I mean, I don't think, like you said, entrepreneurs talk enough about what goes on behind the scenes. Like it's not always hearts and rainbows, everything's amazing. Like it could be very, very challenging, as you know. I mean, there's sleepless nights. I tried to calculate my sleepless nights recently in the last few years. It's insane. It's insane when I tell people like I had to work through the night here and here. And it's just a lot of people don't recognize or understand all that goes into that grit element regarding scaling one's business. So I very much appreciate watching that over the years. And I appreciate all the inspiration that you're giving to other young entrepreneurs as well. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And thanks for, yeah, following along and supporting and letting me come on this platform and share my story.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I got a lot out of it. I know a lot of other people probably did as well. There's three different things that I got out of it. Was the first thing that you mentioned was jump in. I know a lot of people say it, but they don't actually do it. You've actually done it. There's an element of do, learn, adjust, repeat. And if people just did, they learned from what they did, they adjusted and they repeated that. That's an amazing formula that leads to incredible success. And I feel like you have done that to a T. The second thing was you just started asking people. Again, that's something a lot of people will talk about, but very few people actually do. I found it fascinating that you reached out to CEOs of individuals in your arena, in your industry, and they offered you that mentorship. They offered you that advice. I really challenge people listen to gamify the ask. You can make a game out of it and it's actually fun, thinking they're never going to respond to this email, they'll never respond to this letter, they'll never respond to this phone call, and make a game out of it, and people will be amazed, the individuals that do get back in touch. And then the third element was just the uncomfortable piece, that not everyone is going to be comfortable with our story. It could be elements of their experiences and their story that lead to that uncomfortableness, and we just have to go with it, even though we will have naysayers. And often those naysayers will say that they were supportive all along,
Hmm.
like you mentioned. So those are the three elements that I got out of it. I know a lot of other people probably got a lot of other elements out of it. Erica, if there is a way that people want to get in contact with you, they want to learn more about your product, more about what you do, what's the best place they can go to get that information?
Yeah, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Erica Rankin. I have a website too, growwitherica.com, where I teach you how to build a personal brand, and I have a TikTok course. And then our website for our cookie dough and soon to be cookies is brodo.ca. And we have a US wait list as well there for when the new products go live. So it'd be really awesome if you signed up for that.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate you mentioning that. I will include all that in the show notes. People could just click and go. And again, thank you for your time today. I very much appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. Please leave a review, since positive reviews will make it easier for others to find this conversation. Next episode will launch on Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern. Until then, remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to action, you must share more stories.